I want to welcome you to the Stairway Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Jim and I'm an alcoholic. Buddy, I'm really happy to be here. Glad to see all of you here. This meeting is an hour and a half in length and we take a 10-minute break at the halfway point. This is our regular Saturday evening Big Book study meeting. Tonight we are continuing our reading and discussion of the 5th chapter. And I want to remind all of you that at 9:15 we have our Language of the Heart meeting, which follows immediately after this meeting. We study some of the beautiful writings of Bill Wilson and discuss them, and we have a lot of fun. It's a good meeting with a very lively discussion. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce you to our trusted servants, who are the ones who keep this thing going. And we've had we're almost 2 years old now, and we've expanded to 3 meetings, and it's been a great run, and it just keeps getting better. The secretary of our group is back there. Steve, put your hand up. There he is. All right. And our archivist and librarian, Dominic. Put your hand up, Dominic. All right. Our technical director and recording engineer is Tom. Put your hand up there, Tom. All right. Our general service representative, as reluctant a dragon as you will ever see, but nevertheless he is a trusted servant. God bless him. And his name is Nick, and he's right over here. Put your hand up, Nick. And last but absolutely, I promise you not least, is our treasurer, Marilyn, who keeps us all straight. She's our house mother, our godmother, and she hangs on. Oh, by the way, Marilyn, put your hand up. When we get ready to pay the rent, nobody gets to leave, and Marilyn watches very carefully to make sure that we get our rent paid. Okay, next week we'll have our birthday meeting, and then the following Saturday is what we laughingly call our business meeting around here. It's just not like other groups, I guess. We have no blood on the floor. It only takes about 5 minutes. We don't have any rules and regulations in this group, so everything is group conscience. You know, the loving God has to speak to us. If he doesn't say a word, we adjourn in about 2 minutes. You know? So it makes it pretty easy. Okay. This is an AA meeting. We conduct it using an AA format, but it's kind of abbreviated in order to save some time for the big book. So let's start off with a moment of silent meditation, and we'll say the Serenity Prayer together. Thank you. Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. And Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other. They may solve their common problem and help others recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. And there are no dues or fees for a membership. We are self-supporting to our own contributions. And AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober, help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. And this is taken from an article that Bill wrote for the Grapevine in 1958, and it is in addition to our literature, which you may not have heard before. Sobriety, freedom from alcohol through the teaching and practice of the 12 steps is the sole purpose of an AA group. If we don't stick to these principles, we shall almost surely collapse. And if we collapse, we cannot help anyone. So you've heard me say that a few times around here. I wanted to assure you that this isn't something I made up. That's the way it is. Now then, do we have anyone here tonight who's been out improving their resume or doing further intensive research and is just coming back? Like to give us your first name, please. Do we have anyone who is visiting with us from out of town or out of state or outer space? Yes.
Yeah, I'm Willie. I'm from Chicago. I'm an addict.
Hey, Willie. Hey, Willie. All right. We're glad to have you. We have a dear friend of mine here. Introduce yourself, Gene.
I'm Gene, alcoholic from Michigan.
Hey, Gene. We have another one. There she is, yes.
Hi, my name is Bonnie. I'm an alcoholic. I'm from Pennsylvania, Philadelphia.
Your name is Bonnie?
Vanya.
Banya. All right. Beautiful name. Wow. Okay. Anyone else who's just trying to hide out in here or coming in and out of the moonlight or what? Oh, okay. Let's see, where am I? Oh yes, it's customary and traditionalist group to read a portion of chapter 5 from the big book. Who'd like to do that for us tonight?
I will.
Oh, there we go.
I'm Valerie, I'm an alcoholic.
Valerie.
How it works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those, too, who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you've decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. And some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness at our command, we begged you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us, but there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and power to carry that out. 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we try to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaim, "What an order, I can't go through with that." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear three pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. C, that God could and would if He were sought.
I was reminded this morning that it is sneaking up toward Christmas, Noel. I went in to get some breakfast and I ordered eggs Benedict. And the waiter brought them out on a hubcap. Yeah, I said, what in the world is this? Eggs Benedict on a hubcap. He said, it's got to be chrome for the hollandaise. Oh, sorry.
Try the other one too.
Well, you guys have always enjoyed my lawyer jokes, knowing that I'm a lawyer. Guy's sitting in a bar, and there's another guy sitting down the bar from him, and he's talking to the bartender, and he said, you know what? All lawyers are assholes. And this guy at the end of the bar was jumping up and down, giving him dirty looks, and turned over to me and he said, what's the matter with you, lawyer? He says, no, I'm an asshole. No? Well, I'm through for the night. Okay, let's open our books up to page 60, please. 60. Now then, one of the most wonderful things about doing the big book together is we get to do the steps together as we go through the book. And we get to look at them in great detail, and we get to massage them and think about them and play with them and look around and see how they fit together with each other and how they fit throughout the book and where all the instructions are. And we've just finished reviewing all 12 steps. We took 3 weeks to do it, to see how these steps work together, how they fit into a continuum, how each one depends upon the ones that came before and builds toward the ones that come after. We got a chance to review each of the steps a little bit. And now on page 60, we're going to continue with the reading of chapter 5. And this will be leading us into the third step in some detail as we go along. Before we move any further, however, let's make sure that we remember what has happened so far in this chapter. It's so important to remind ourselves of chapter 5. That's why so many groups have it read at the beginning of a meeting. Unfortunately, I think most of the time we're thinking about other stuff, or it's just a kind of a lull in the meeting. We'll wait till it's over so we can get down to the meeting. But these first 3 pages in chapter 5 contain the whole program of Alcoholics Anonymous, including all 12 steps. And one of the things which is maybe a bit disturbing to some is that these pages are clearly reciting things which we must do. These pages are filled with categorical imperatives, the things that there's no wiggle room, no equivocation. It's just, this is what we must do or else. So it can be a little disturbing to those who would prefer to have a program which had a lot more give in it, which was really kind of a comparative analysis of our feelings or something like that. I mean, after all, isn't it true we are entitled to our feelings? Of course we are. And we have to spout them off at every opportunity to whoever's going to listen. And especially if we don't feel good, we can go to a meeting and we can dump all of our don't feel good stuff on the whole meeting. We walk out feeling great and everybody in there feels lousy. But then maybe that's the way it's supposed to be, I don't know. In any event, these 3 pages are very clear in their message, and they lay the foundation, the groundwork for all of the steps and for the whole program. So, when we have been exposed to the 12 steps, and then we go on page 60, and then the next sentence on page 60, just below the 12th step, many of us exclaimed, "What an order! I can't go through with it." Some people read that, "What? An order? I can't go through with it." God, this is a dead group tonight. I don't know. Why don't everybody get out some hot toddies or something? I'm giving up. No more jokes. You guys have had it. From here on, we're going to get real serious around here. Okay, I can't go through with it. Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We're not saints. Now, of course, there's a background to this, and as there is with everything in this book, there's a lot more going on here than sometimes meets the eye. That's why as we go through the book together, we parse the sentences, we look to see what these words mean and the context within which they're stated. For example, what about this never being able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles? Well, first of all, what does the word principles refer to? These principles. The modifier there is these. It points at what? It points at the steps, doesn't it? The 12 steps are 12 spiritual principles. And as we've said before, there are no principles behind principles. So the steps themselves are what we're talking about when we talk about the principles of the program. These principles. Perfect adherence. Why in the world would it be necessary to point that out? Well, in 1939, when this was written, it was felt to be very important because these guys had been struggling with the Oxford's 6 steps, and the Oxford's idea, their tenet, their credo, that if one were to work their 6 steps, one would become perfect. Perfect love, perfect this, serenity, I don't know, 4 perfects that they had. And this was, they truly believed that if you just did this, these 6 steps of theirs, that you would reach a stage of perfection. And our guys found out that wasn't true. At least it certainly wasn't true for them. In fact, they found that they had to have much more than those 6 steps. And out of that need evolved, for example, the 10th step, which was not found at all in the Oxford 6 steps. It was nothing even close to it, because they really looked at this as really coming close to sainthood. And I guess they were all walking around with their adjustable halos or something. Oh, I wasn't going to tell any more jokes, was I? I give up. All right. Maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. Well, now here's the problem with that statement. It is a true statement, obviously, and it comes out of the fact that the guys who wrote this book were quite aware that they could not reach a stage of perfection, and even though in the beginning they may have tried for it, they realized that that was futile and that it wasn't going to work. And then not only that, but they found out they were going to have to do something every day just to maintain their spiritual fitness and to grow spiritually. They found out that they were not saints. One of the things that brought that about was that some of the guys like Bill and some of his cronies had been pushing the St. Francis prayer. And of course, when he got the chance to write the 12 and 12, he had to stick that back in there again. And a lot of those guys had been using that, and some of the others were saying, but wait a second, if you're asking God to make you like St. Francis, and that ain't going to happen, why do something like that? So that's how that got squeezed in there. We're not saints. But the point is that we're willing to grow along spiritual lines, and the principles we've set down are guides to progress, and we claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Well, now those statements go directly to what we're going to read a little bit further on in this chapter when we get to the third step. And in the third step, we're going to find out that God will give us everything we need if we do two things: if we stay close to Him and if we perform His work well. Well, now it turns out that staying close to God is a function of 10, 11, and 12, and it means that we must grow spiritually. There's no standing still. Any implication, by the way, in that phrase on page 85 about maintaining spiritual fitness, people talk about being maintenance steps. Well, in the sense that we maintain spiritual fitness by growing spiritually, yes. But if you use that to mean we're going to stand still, but we're not going to go back and we're not going forward, it doesn't mean that at all. In other words, what we're looking at here is spiritual progress is the key. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Now, everything is keyed then in the 10th, 11th, and 12th steps towards spiritual progress. And if we stop to think about it, it's kind of like trying to go up to the second floor but having to use the down escalator to do it. You got to move a little bit faster up, then that thing's coming down. You stand still, you're going right back down to the bottom. And so everything in 10, 11, and 12 is keyed to this business of spiritual progress, knowing that we probably won't reach a stage of spiritual perfection. Now, Bill wrote about this spiritual perfection stuff in several different places, and in fact, it was quite an item with him. He liked to write about it, and I also like to talk about it, that it was not a question of expecting to become perfect, but it is very clearly a question of being willing to work toward perfection. That we keep this ideal in mind. This is where we are headed. We have this vision of perfection, and we work toward it. In fact, Bill was very big on vision. You may remember, if you've read As Bill Sees It on page 317, he talks about this, how important it is to have vision and to work toward that, because he says this having vision is what activates all the dynamics in your life. And when we sit there with no vision, no aspirations, but just letting life wash over us, with he calls it the fatuous idea of providence, that somehow God has already written large on some great slate up in the sky, everything's going to happen to us, so what the hell, we don't need to do anything, we just sit back and see what happens. Sort of a nihilistic concept, that there's nothing you can do about it anyway, so just relax and enjoy it. Well, that's not what that means. Spiritual progress then implies something which we read about in the 11th step, where it tells us that we alcoholics are very undisciplined people, and we have to let God discipline us in the way we've just outlined, which of course means doing the work. There's another place in between the 10th and 11th steps where it tells us that every day we must seek knowledge of God's will for us, and thy will not mine be done, and that these are thoughts which must go with us constantly. And then it says that we can exercise our willpower along these lines all we want, which means that we will ourselves to turn our will over to God. It sounds like a conundrum, but it's not really. It is. It's the way we do business now, because it's every day we know we're going to have to go through a process of surrender. As a matter of fact, as we read the book together, we're going to find that this business not only of reaching a place of surrender, which is the function of the first 9 steps, but then staying in a state of surrender is very important, and in fact it's crucial to us, and we'll see that there are various things that we do each day in order to stay in a state of surrender. And so we're going to claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. And I suppose those of us who are in fact working the steps, and pretty sure that accounts for everybody in here, because this is not your usual Problems Anonymous meeting, so I know you're interested in the big book and the steps and God, or you wouldn't even be here. So we get to claim spiritual progress, even though we may only be on our second, third, fourth, fifth step. We are progressing spiritually. And sometimes it's hard to see that, and yet in fact it's happening. You want to test that? It's very simple. You go to the 10th step, you look back, you see that we've done our first 9 steps, and what's happened? We've been restored to sanity. We've entered the world of the Spirit. We become God conscious. We developed a vital sixth sense. My God, that is spiritual progress to the nth degree. And we've in fact reached a place of surrender. We've come to know our higher power. So then we go on page 60, second full paragraph, our description of the alcoholic, which of course really takes in Dr. Silkworth's opinion, and Bill's story in large part is a description of his journey through alcoholism. The second chapter, There is a Solution, describes alcoholism again. Chapter 3 obviously is more about alcoholism. And in chapter 4 we find even more. So when this talks about our description of the alcoholic, it's really talking about Dr. Silkworth's opinion in the first 4 chapters. The chapter to the agnostic, of course, is the 4th chapter again. And just like everything else in this book, there's nothing which has any exclusivity. I mean, none of these chapters can be pigeonholed and stand alone over here as if they were some little separate entity. They all work together, just like the steps. They all meld together, just like the steps do. And then our personal adventures before and after. Now, a lot of people don't understand why you have to read the big book, and not part of it, but the book. Now let's see, what personal adventures do we have? We have Bill's story. We have some idea of what's that guy's name? Roland Hazard. You know, he's the guy who went over and spent a year with Dr. Young. We've got the stories of Jim and the story of Fred. And then we've got a guy who's not named but stayed sober for 25 years till he retired and died in 2 or 3 years. And then we've got the allegory of the jaywalker. Now that's hardly a personal story. So there must mean more than that, and it does. Personal adventures before and after refers not only to the stories in the first 164 pages, but all the stories. Why? Well, it's very simple. Think about it. This book was written for a newcomer, wasn't it? Suppose you were sitting in Cucamonga, California, or Podunk, Iowa, if there is such a place. And there's no AAs around. Nobody ever heard of AA unless they read the Saturday Evening Post, and then they probably wouldn't remember that. But you've acquired a copy of this book. You're an alcoholic. An alcoholic, by definition, is in a state of denial. An alcoholic, by definition, is in a hopeless state of mind and body. At least he or she believes it to be hopeless. Now then, you've got this book. What is this book going to do for you? If you're going to pick it up and you stay in absolute denial, nothing's going to happen, is it? There's no way that you're going to be enlightened or even encouraged by this book. Because after all, there's nothing wrong with you. So the first thing this book was written to do was to break down that denial. Now a good part of that is found in the first 164 pages in the doctor's opinion, but there's a whole lot more sitting back there in the back of the book. Why? Because the person in Cucamonga picks up this book and reads those stories in the back of the book, and somewhere back there he's going to find himself, or she's going to find herself, maybe more than once. You're going to say, wow, that's me. This is a real person. This is not some made-up fairy tale. This is not a bunch of philosophical claptrap. This is not psychobabble. These are real people who are saying, I am an alcoholic. Here is what happened to me. This is the way I drank. Here's what alcohol did to me. Here's how I tried to stop and couldn't. And here's how I recovered. And so, as I read this, I'm saying, yeah, I see, that's me. And not only did this person recover, but I can see myself in that story. And then I read another 4 or 5 stories, and boom, another one jumps right out and says, gee, that's me too. And so, what's happening here is that the walls of denial are being broken down, being torn down. See how important that is? Now then, what else is happening? If I'm identifying with these 3 people in the back of the book, and I see myself in Bill's story, and all 4 of these people have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, what does that mean for me? I'm like them, I drank like them, it affects me the same way, I've reached the same bottom, and they recovered. Wow, maybe I can too. So you see, we not only have the breaking down of denial, but we have the bringing of hope. And so when the big book here is talking about our personal adventures before and after, it's talking about the stories. And somehow or another we've gotten into this lazy man or lazy woman syndrome where we tell a new person, well, just read the first 2 chapters. Or if we get really wild about it, we'll tell them to read the first 164 pages. And we forget that in chapter 7 it says, read the book. In fact, on page 108, at the top of the page, the first 3 words are, read this book. 106? 112. You sure? Oh boy. All right. Is it 112? Oh my gosh. Have I been misleading people all these years? Yes, I have. Thank you, Gene. Gene is a student of the big book, so I got to be careful what I say. He has no shame at all in correcting me either. You know. Page 112. Read this book. All right. So when we read this, it says, our personal adventures before and after make clear 3 pertinent ideas. Now we hear these all the time. Do we stop and think what they mean? This is really profound stuff. Do we realize that these 3 little sentences here contain one of the great promises in the big book? I hope so. And we need to pass this on to the new person that comes in the door. First of all, we see the first step, don't we? That we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. And then we see at least the glimmer of the second step, that no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. I left out the word probably, and I did that deliberately, shamelessly left it out. Because the truth is that I suppose there may be those very rare people who are going to be helped in one way or another by the human solution, but it's so rare that it is one of those exceptions which prove the rule that no human power is going to relieve us of our alcoholism. If human power could do it, none of us would be here. There'd be no reason for it. We wouldn't have to go through all of this. We would just go find those human beings who had the magic formula, the pill, the shot, the encounter session, the book, whatever it turned out to be that would solve our problem, when we'd get our problem solved and go on our way. It doesn't work that way. So no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. And now then, this third pertinent idea. Every time we see this, we ought to stop and contemplate what this means. Let's turn it around to be personal for us. That God can and will, if we seek Him. God can and will relieve us of the obsession and compulsion to drink alcohol, if we but seek Him. Now, if we look at it that way, what a great promise this is. Now, is it true? Yes, it is true. Does this mean that we are cured of alcoholism? No. Does this mean that we have received the gift of all the steps just because we're seeking God? No. But does it mean that we will be relieved of the obsession and compulsion to drink alcohol if we but seek God? Yes, it does. That leaves something wide open, does it not? How do we go about seeking God? Now, of course, you can find a lot of different answers to that question. Many of them reside in each of the houses of religious worship, or the philosophical approaches, or even those religions which don't have a house of worship. We have 12 steps. The way we seek God in here is we work the steps. And what's amazing and wonderful about it is that if we do that, we find Him. We find the God of our own understanding. We find a higher power to whom we can turn and whom we come to trust and to have faith in. And though we may not be able to describe this God, this higher power, in any terms that would be meaningful to anyone else, nevertheless, He exists for us, and our lives change, and we become different, and we become better. And eventually, if we work at it, we get to have our heritage, which is to be happy, joyous, and free. We get to have that. And we get to have a mission, a purpose in life, a reason for living. And we get to finally get out of ourselves and get into God's will. And we begin to be helpful to others and watch them recover and to develop a host of friends. It's an amazing life. But God can and will if I seek Him, and by seeking Him, all that I need to do is to work the steps. And if I work steps with a good heart and I follow the directions in the big book, the promises come true. God will be doing for me what I cannot do for myself. I will draw close to Him, and then my job is to stay close and to perform His work well. And when that happens, He gives me everything I need. Everything. That's a promise too, and it's also true. So whenever you hear chapter 5 being read, think about this last sentence. God can and will, if I but seek Him. Can and will relieve me of the obsession, compulsion to drink. It will be gone. The problem will be solved. We found this out back in the 4th chapter. Maybe we didn't pay attention. They told us that's why this book was written. Its purpose is to enable you and me to find a power greater than ourselves which will solve our problem. When we get up to the 10th step, we find our problem's been solved. It doesn't exist. It's gone. It stays that way just so long as we remain spiritually fit. And all this stuff is true. There's a big problem here, though, isn't there? We have to do some work. We can't get this by sitting on the couch and flipping through channels. We can't get this by coming to meetings alone. We don't get this by having coffee at Starbucks. We don't get this by being trusted servants or cleaning ashtrays. We don't get this by worshiping a pickup truck doorknob or ashtray. We don't get this by worshiping as our higher power some AA group made up of humans just like us. We get this by surrendering. And the surrender that the road to surrender is the road of the 12 steps. It's that simple. And the directions are simple. The problem, the rub is that we have to do the work. And we have to get honest with ourselves. And we don't like that. A lot of these things we have to get honest about, we've been running from them all our lives. And all of a sudden we're right here. We have reached a point where we have to fish or cut bait. We're either going to take a stand and look at ourselves honestly and completely and fully, or we're going to keep running. And so many decide to run.